Was it?
Hello, hello, hello. How is everybody today? This is the SUNY Broom Republicans being brought to you by your two favorite hosts. That is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and
Michael Woodward from SUNY Broom Republicans.
that's right. We're both here with you today, and we're going to be having a great conversation. There is a lot that is going on in our country.
Isn't that the truth?
Oh, obviously the biggest news that's out there is the fact that the government has shut down. And obviously we're going to be talking about that because that's going to affect everyone in the nation, especially when we're talking about the students at SUNY Broom.
Oh, yeah.
And every school and institution across the country. So everyone's going to be affected by this. So we're going to be talking about that, of course. We also should probably start off with something that's a little more current. Well, happened also in the last week.
Oh, yeah.
And that's at SUNY Broom. There was a public forum.
Yep, at Decker 201.
At Decker Hall. And that was room 201. That was on Thursday, the 18th. And it was a really interesting event.
Absolutely.
That was because of Professor Garnar, right?
Yes.
And
he's actually the head of civic engagement at SUNY Broom. Very, very nice man.
yeah, he is. And he had a very unique idea, which was to go out and in most public forums, what usually tends to happen, for those who are not familiar, you'll have the public, whomever is interested will show up, and you'll have various elected officials and or candidates, and they'll be speaking to the public about whatever issues and ideas and priorities that they might have. On this event, it was actually reversed. The elected officials, which would include State Senator Fred Akshar, Assemblyman Clifford Crouch, Assemblywoman Donna Lapardo, County Executive Jason Garnar, Mayor Greg Deemy of Johnson City, Mayor Rich David of Binghamton, all gathered, and they were there to listen to the public talk about the priorities that they had and that they believed that the city of Binghamton, Broome County, and New York should be addressing going forward in 2018 and beyond. And so that's a little bit different than what they're usually used to. They're usually used to being people speaking. They were actually being spoken to.
Yeah, that was a great. I loved how that worked out. It was a great idea.
Yeah, and it was very non-political. So it wasn't Democrats versus Republicans, and there was none of that really going on. It was more of, here's an issue that members of the public have, and they wanted to address this, and they brought it up and said, okay, this should be a priority. This is a way to move forward. And
it was great. They should do more of those. But there again, time is always an essence of that.
Oh, always. But I know that Professor Garnar did mention that this is something he wants to do more of.
Yes.
And they had invited more comments and commentary from everyone involved to see how they can make this bigger and more involved. And I think one of the things should be that the students at SUNY Broom, it should be done during session.
Oh, yes.
And I think, inviting all of the students done during a time of day. It was done at 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, but maybe doing it a little bit earlier, slightly earlier, so all the students can be involved as well, or maybe doing one for students and one for the general public. I don't know.
One thing I like about Professor Garnar as well is I did have an issue once, and I spoke with him about it, and he actually walked me into student council and introduced me to all the people that I needed to talk to right there. Boom. And he's very pleasant to talk with, and he knows what's going on.
Yeah. So I just want to send this out to him and all those who are involved in the process. They deserve a round of applause and attention for the effort that they put into this to make this happen. It was actually pretty short notice, and that probably was the other big thing that I know a couple of people mentioned, that there was only the news of the event came out on Sunday, and then the event was on Thursday. Not really enough time to let people know what was going on there.
Well, it happens.
Now, some of the subjects that were covered in the event that people may be interested in, there were people talking about single-payer health care.
Yeah.
There was a large undercurrent of that, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a second, but there was term limits was another big issue that came up. The fact that the policy of New York State needs to change because it's been ineffective for about 65 years now. Another one was voter reform, feeding the hungry. These were all issues that were being brought up and addressed during the meeting.
There was another issue that was brought up as well, and that was actually from a professor that I had last semester, and that was the issue of part-time, full-time positions on campus. And she's not the first professor that I've heard mention that either. And to me, that is an issue because these are our educators. These are the people that we are depending on to give us the right information, and they should be given the opportunity, unless that's something to do with a union or something.
What do you mean?
Well, a lot of times if positions are union, you start off as a part-time employee, you gain your seniority, and then at that point you move up into a full-time position. But I don't know if that's the case there or not. So I don't want to speculate.
Sounds like standard tenure practices at all colleges.
Possible. I'm not sure. I can't say yes or no to it.
Yeah, it's pretty standard that you go in, you become an assistant or adjunct professor, and then you try and get tenure. And the thing that always upsets me about tenure is once you've achieved it, you're essentially bulletproof. You can't be removed. You're there for life.
Yeah, that is a problem. There's one professor in particular that I was scheduled to take a course with them. And I was actually told by 3 professors not to take it, to switch, because the person there was a lot of colorful language used. How about that I don't want to use on the show. And I looked them up on Rate My Professor, and every single review was bad. There was not one good review. I can understand 1 or 2, because you always have that one student that thinks they're entitled to a good grade or whatever the case is, but it was every single one.
Yeah, well, there's always the bad professor. And by the way, folks, what we're looking at right now, just as a side note, we're hoping for a guest to call in, and we're kind of looking for that. You recognize that number?
I don't recognize it, but it could be.
Okay. Well, send him a text. Ask him. I don't know who it is. So hopefully that's one of our guests trying to call in and reach us to be part of the show. Did you send them a message?
Normally a 518.
Okay, then send them a message. But one of the big things I thought that was real interesting last night was there was a very strong undercurrent for an event that's supposed to be featuring the general public. There were basically 3 sides that actually showed up. There were several progressive far-left members of Citizen Action and its related groups. There was a middle ground, individuals who are just genuinely involved or interested in the public, and individuals that don't normally show up to these kind of events. And then there were those who are the quasi-politicos, myself as an example, and a few others, speaking about a whole bunch of different subjects. And I found it interesting because the representation wasn't quite a fair representation of what I see out here. Maybe on the campus, you tell me, is single payer, do a lot of students talk about single payer healthcare?
I have heard it on campus, yes.
Okay. Because I can tell you that in the community, not a real issue. The only people who talk about single payer healthcare for the most part are usually people who are involved deeply in politics, like Citizen Action. They and their members talk about it a lot. And that's about it. And I've never really heard people who aren't part of Citizen Action or the far left progressives who've ever mentioned it. And they are a very small portion of the entire population.
Right, yeah. Well, I think for a lot of students, their big concern is will they find a job in the future with good benefits, with a good retirement? I think that's their big concern.
Well, if that's their concern, then on a related note, they should be super, super excited about what President Trump's been doing, which didn't come up in the meeting, but it is related. It's, what's going on in our country. What are the priorities of our nation at this time? And I remember that I had said, and it was on Facebook, I made a post just yesterday, Friday, and I want to read that for a second, since this is coming up. And bear with me for 1 second. Oh, here it is. It was a snapshot of America. And tell me what you think about this now. And I said on January 19th at 5:04 p.m., snapshot of America. Taxes are lower. Economy is stronger. Unemployment is down. Self-employment is up. Stock market is higher. 401ks are better off. Business is reinvesting in America, and many people have raises. Russia is relatively quiet. North Korea is entering into talks. ISIS has essentially gone silent. The United States government lost the Bundy case, and there is a whole lot more. But Democrats are still screaming, the world will end in 20 minutes unless the nation goes backwards and loses all these gains, because they might get another 0.2% of votes. And if you don't agree with what they have to say, the Democrats will take food and money from kids, single parents, the poor, the old, and military families. Oh, and we're supposed to believe that only the bad stuff is Republicans' fault, regardless of the vote count in Congress. It's just another brilliant plan by Pelosi and Schumer, end quote. So, sound right?
Yeah. Well, I think for a lot of the students that are on campus, it's who they're listening to and what information they're getting.
Well, the fact, these are facts. I mean,
oh yes,
stock market, you look it up, and what's in the stock market. When people, their retirement funds are based on mutual funds, which are in the stock market.
Yep.
So if the stock market's going up, people's 401ks are getting funded. It's pretty straightforward. Unemployment rate is down. That's direct and simple. So there's more jobs. We're seeing 170 companies are bringing back the money that's been sitting overseas for about 10 years now, because we lowered the tax rate. Like Apple, as a great example, is bringing over billions, about $35 billion or $38 billion in revenue that's been sitting overseas. They're bringing it back into America and hiring 20,000 workers.
Well,
these are all good things.
Let's go back to the meeting that we attended the other night,
right,
at Broome. If you remember, the college professors stated that corporate profit should be paying for more. So there's the issue. They feel, for whatever reason, the evil corporations should be paying for different things for the people, opposed to investing in their own businesses, which will, in essence, create jobs, which is better for everybody.
Well, companies are paying taxes. So, see, I don't understand that fallacy.
Yeah.
Corporations are paying taxes. That's just a absolute fact. You can't even deny it. Matter of fact, if you were to go to the usdebtclock.org, usdebtclock.org, go check it out, because it has a real-time index of exactly what's going on in our country. And corporate tax revenues have brought in $314,283,957,000 and some odd dollars in revenue to our country just since January.
Holy smokes. So evidently they are paying a lot of money.
Well, yeah, they really, really are. That's our government right now. So when they say, oh, well, they're not making a payment, well, that's kind of stupid, because, yeah, they are. They're making a huge amount of payments. And by putting in, and think about it, the payroll tax, which is another huge tax, which companies pay for. Well, that happens to be $1,173,485,949,000 and some odd dollars at this moment that I'm speaking, and it's going higher. That's from corporations as well. So you're talking about $1.5 trillion paid in taxes by corporations, not including the fact that companies, 170 of them, are now bringing billions of dollars back into the country and opening up new jobs.
And what about the payroll taxes that people are making money? What about that money that will be paid out as well?
Well, that means that's the income tax revenue.
Right, exactly.
And income taxes are $1.6 I just ticked over 1.6, basically $1.6 trillion. The numbers are, this is live, so the numbers are going up as I speak.
With that being, it's interesting too, because once you start talking about more jobs being created, if they are quality jobs, production model or whatever the case may be, also these are people that are getting health insurance too. So now you're taking the whole Obamacare thing.
Not necessarily. That isn't necessarily true, because some of them, about 20 million people aren't getting health care because they don't want it. And there's another 20 million who are forced to get it because the government decided that you don't have a choice. And that's, so there's 40 million people who,
is it that they didn't want it, or they make just a little bit too much and they can't afford it?
No, they don't want it.
Okay.
They've done studies on it.
Well, that's true. That brick of people between, say, 20 years old and 35.
18 to 25.
Yeah, they really don't. For the most part, they're very healthy, so they don't need it. It's once they hit 25, 30, we all know that, the problems are coming.
40.
Yeah, especially
40 and above.
Yeah, 40
is
and above.
Usually where people start using healthcare for the most part.
Yeah.
And most people still don't need it there.
Yeah.
But the numbers don't balance. But that's an argument about Obamacare, and I won't get into that. But the reason why that relates and why these numbers are important is you're seeing one of the things, and I was one of the speakers at the event. There is video online. You can go to YouTube and see it. If you go to mvass.com, you'll be able to see the entire unedited video of every question asked and every comment made during the entire event at SUNY Broome. And when I made my comment, which is at roughly 38 minutes into the event, I said, we need to make a change. We need to change the way New York State policy is going. And this is an example of what I mean. For decades, we were talking about cutting the corporate tax, and we never did. And once we did do it, now we're seeing the positive. I mean, Walmart increased its minimum wage for its workers. They are giving out bigger bonuses to their employees. So we're seeing that you change the way you do things, and there is room for improvement. That's what I said at the meeting. The numbers prove, or seem to prove at this moment, that that's correct. And I think that's one of the most important things. We have to try and do things different.
I recall reading an article, it was back in 2005 in the Wall Street Journal, about Bill Gates getting a loan because it was cheaper to get a loan than it was to bring his own money into the country because of the taxes.
It is. Well, that's
sad.
That's true of any company, any international company. It's actually cheaper. It was until the taxes were cut, which were done by Republicans. They put that forward after 2 decades of both sides, Democrats and Republicans, promising to cut the tax rate. When they finally did it, that only then did it become cheaper to actually bring your money into the country rather than just get a new loan and have the money overseas. It just tells you how bad it was in our nation. But with that said, it's time for our break, first break of the program. And when we come back, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the government shutdown. This is going to affect SUNY Broome students, as well as the entire community. And so we should really talk about that.
Let's see what happens with federal and state aid.
Well, it's going to be a lot of things. Yep. But we'll go into that in 1 second, and we'll be right back. Hello, everybody, and it's good to be back again. Thank you for joining us here at the SUNY Broome Republicans, and you're listening to your two hosts, Michael Voss.
And Michael Woodward.
That's right. So we've been talking about the public forum at SUNY Broome, and it was a great opportunity to speak to the legislators and representatives throughout this for the county and state level for our community. And it was a very informative event. Now, the other thing, though, and that was on Thursday night, but as of Friday night, and I was up at midnight watching the vote and watching that the Democrats lived up to their threat to shut down the government. And as well documented, I think you saw something on CBS.
Oh, yes.
The fact is that the budget, as it stands, there is no question, no one has any argument about funding the government. There is the question about DACA, which is the illegal immigrants. Now, before we go anywhere with this, I want to first say, let's go through the data we know for sure. Currently, the national debt is $20 trillion, $612 billion, $20,612,291,000,000, and some odd, it's ticking up as we go, dollars. That's our debt right now. And current federal spending is at just under 4.1 million. Billion, hundreds, thousands, millions, trillion. Wow, it's crazy numbers.
I'd like to know what these people are. How do they actually run their own household?
Well, that's a different question altogether. Now, because the government shut down, as of midnight, there were about 800,000 federal workers no longer could go to work. They're not getting paid. They're on furlough. Basically, they temporarily don't have a job. That happened as of midnight.
Yeah, NASA's running a very skeleton crew right now because of that.
Well, everything scales down.
Yeah.
Now, there's two things to take into account. There are short-term effects, and then there are long-term effects when a government shuts down. And you're not going to feel the full impact right away, but it is going to affect students. So, and here's how it works. Out of 327 million people, and to be exact, it's 327,779,325 Americans in this nation, of which 165,472,515 Americans, as of this moment, receive some form of government aid. Every single one of them, given time, will be affected. This includes the 39,335,247 people who are living in poverty, including children, the 46,132,556 people who are receiving food stamps. It goes even further. So there are just under 21 million veterans who are going to be affected by this, 51.6 million U.S. retirees, they will be affected. 10.4 million U.S. disabled will be affected. And this includes the schools. And there's over 50 million students in schools that are going to be affected. Now, this is data coming straight off of the U.S. debt clock. I'm reading that off. But we automatically have 800,000 federal employees out of the 23 million that are federal employees. They're out of work right now. And then it's going to just scale up from there. The last time we had the government shutdown, and this isn't not, and by the way, this is not new. It shut down 12 times before, since 1981. Shutdowns have lasted from anywhere from 1 day to 21 days. In 2013, the most recent shutdown was for 16 days. It cost $1.5 billion per day. So these are some of the stats, some of the data here. Now, in terms of schools, are you okay? Joking to death there.
Yeah, that 1.5, I guess that got me.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. But it's going to affect schools in a big way because in terms of funding, no new funding is going out to schools. So if you have a grant that you had already received, you got it. If you're looking for a new grant, you won't get it. If you're doing a research project and it was depending on a future grant, you're not going to get it. And same thing with Social Security, with all of the underfunding. As the more time goes by, more and more of these programs will get shut down. More and more of these programs are going to be affected. So you may think, well, my Pell Grant is mandatory. It means I'm perfectly fine. No, that means if you got it already, you're fine. If you need it going forward, you're not.
Yeah, there may be an issue coming up.
It's definitely going to be a problem. And the longer it goes, the bigger the problems are, and they build on each other. So it gets worse and worse as more time passes by. So, looking at the students at SUNY Broome, given it, while they may not, some of the students are going to be immediately affected because they had grants that needed to be approved. They're not going to. Those workers aren't there, for one. And for two, the government doesn't have the money. They're not getting it. So that means students are being denied an education.
That could be an issue.
On top of that, some students receive food stamps.
Yes.
That will be shut down. That's going to, again, as the days go by, that's going to be shut off. They're not going to be able to be fed. It gets worse. Medical. If you have government-backed health insurance, if you need the government to help pay for it, guess what? That doesn't exist anymore. So you're not going to get that either. Let me put everybody on hold for 1 second. Bear with me 1 second. Hello, everybody. So we want to apologize here at SUNY Broome Republicans because it's a little bit unusual. We had 2 guest callers come, and they, just because of traffic and some other delays, were able to come in after we had started taping. And so because of that, what we're doing is the first 2 segments you heard that we were speaking about on all the issues, we're going to contain that as its own episode. And then we're going to start a second episode, which is completely dedicated to our 2 speakers. And those 2 are
Carney Barnes, the Federation Chair, or not Federation Chair, I'm sorry, the Regional Chairman of Central New York for the New York State Federation of College Republicans. And then also Paul Kusta, which is the New York State President, New York State Federation of College Republicans.
Okay. And those are our 2 guests. And so we're going to be speaking with them, and we'll have that as its own episode. So with that said, we do thank you. And I know it's a little bit surprising for everyone, but we'll put that into the notations as well. So you'll see that and you won't be too surprised when you see the episode. So with that, then we'll just end this episode here, and then we'll come back and you'll hear us speaking with our 2 guests, Paul and also
Carney.
And we'll speak with them at length about all the issues of being young Republicans in college, the shutdown, everything that's going on. Okay. So we thank you, and we look forward to speaking with you again in the very near term.